This is the Marriage Podcast, and I'm your host, Alexandra Stockwell. I'm a physician turned relationship and intimacy expert, and I specialize in showing couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships. I myself have been married for 25 years. My husband and I have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing relationship. If you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship, and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place because I will show you how. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, this is Alexandra, and I am really excited I want to say welcome back, Dr. Sonia Wright. She hasn't actually been on the Marriage Podcast, but I did interview her in my Facebook group, The Intimate Marriage, and Sonia Wright is an amazing, amazing human being with so many interesting stories in so many ways. And to just get in the right landscape, she is a radiologist, a sex counselor, a life coach who is a whiz with mindset. And she has a very recent history of having worked in a sex toy shop. And when we last spoke, this was in the other interview in my Facebook group, it was the last week of you working as a radiologist. So, welcome to the show. And like anything you want the audience to know, and how is it to now be exclusively devoted to sex counseling and life coaching in your professional work?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Alexandra, for having me on your show. It's really an honor. I love the work that you do. And so when you introduce me and you say all these wonderful things about me, I'm like, wait, what? We should be talking about you and how fabulous you are. So thank you so much for inviting me here to this podcast. I definitely appreciate that. And then how has the last 6 months been? Because it's just been about 6 months, right? Since the last time we talked. It has been spectacularly wonderful. It has just been so good. I love the work that I do. I love doing sexual counseling and life coaching and merging those together to be a sex coach. I love doing the mind work. I've had so many great experiences over the last 6 months, and it's just been fabulous. And I've also found that I love radiology too. And so I'm figuring out how to have both things, have everything, my cake and eat it too, right?
Oh my goodness, this is exactly what you teach women, that you can have it all and all the flavors, not necessarily at the same time, but you get to have all of the flavors. And it sounds like you're giving yourself your own beautiful medicine in how you're approaching your professional life. Does that mean you actively want to be doing radiology again?
I'll probably do some radiology. You're going to find this quite amusing. I found this really amusing. For the first 5 months, I was like, I'm done with medicine. It had its time and its place and everything. That's good. Then I started having, I just laugh at this. I started having dreams like you would have dreams of a former lover, right? And I was having dreams about caressing my fluoroscopy machine. Like it's an extension of me as a radiologist. And especially as a pediatric radiologist, our fluoroscopy machines are definitely extensions of ourselves. And it was coming up to me in dreams, and I was realizing that I love the work that I do. I adore being an entrepreneur, and I love the sex coaching work that I do. But I realized that I actually enjoy who I am and how my mind works in a different way in medicine. And so I was like, okay, I'll do a little medicine, but the majority of the time I will be doing sex coaching.
It's so interesting because when we were speaking then and when we're speaking now, I'm reflecting on my transition. And because I practiced family medicine, I don't find it to be at its essence so different to serve people in their relationships. Of course, it is very different because I'm not touching anyone and I'm working exclusively through Zoom. And it is, I'm not talking about colds and just pneumonia and things like that. But in terms of the feeling of how I connect with my clients, that's very similar to my favorite ways to have connected when I was practicing medicine. In your case, as a radiologist, that is dramatically different from sex coaching. So I find it so intriguing that it feels like more of an absence to you.
Yeah, it feels like an absence in some ways. Like the sex coaching has been so wonderful because you have the impact, right? You see the impact on people's lives. You see how it saves people's marriages. You see that work that you do, right? Whereas when you're a radiologist, it's really a lot behind the scenes, right? You look at the images, you make diagnoses or lists of potential diagnoses. You interact with the consultant, and since I'm a pediatric radiologist, I also would do like one day a week, I do my fluoroscopy where I'm right there with the patient and doing different procedures and diagnostic work with them. But it is definitely different, and I use different parts of my brain, and I kind of enjoy using different parts of my, there is crossover between the two, definitely, but it is very different work overall.
That's amazing. And I see so many future conversations I want to have with you because I think you have an incredible elegance and grace in switching from one language to another, one culture to another, one way of being with people and another. We're talking about it in medicine. I think we could probably talk about it in a lot of other ways. You sought out that experience to go from being a practicing physician to working in a sex toy shop. Which country are you born in?
Yeah. So when you started mentioning this, it brought up for me that I have been straddling different worlds and cultures my whole life. So this is nothing new for me, and maybe that's why it's easy for me to like straddle and do different things, right? So I was born in England. My parents are from the Caribbean, Barbados and Jamaica, and so like I was born in England, but then we immigrated to Canada, and then well, 5 years later, we immigrated to the States, right? So I've like being a child of immigrants and being an immigrant myself, like I had an underlying culture that's Caribbean in nature, but I consider myself African American. But then straddling those two worlds, right? And that's just within. If somebody looked at me, they would just think, "Oh, you're African American." We wouldn't necessarily see all the different cultures that go into making me who I am, right? But then when you choose to go into medicine as a person of color, you are going to be, or, whatever it is that you do in terms of higher academic, unless you go to a historically Black university or college, you will be a minority. And as you move along within college and then medical school, like your numbers usually get smaller and smaller, right? And unfortunately, so that being the case, you also have learned to straddle the African American culture and like the greater or the larger like majority culture, and be able to translate and talk between those two worlds as well. And then the lay world and medicine world, if you choose to become, a doctor. And then also when I made the decision, a sexual counselor kind of stays within the medical world, but a sex coach does not. And that's a different world as well. So there's just so many overlays in terms of like the different cultures. So I guess for me to be in the medical world and then in the life coaching and sex coaching world as well, it's a unique experience, but not something that I haven't done before.
Yes, and I want to just give you the reflection that I find you extremely generous in how you present your various identities and cultures and roles, because I have the experience, and I just mean to describe this in a neutral way with total respect for the people that this would describe, that they allow me to participate in the culture that they choose to share with me, and I'm just not welcome to interact with the other aspects of a person. I think that that is how many of us go through life. And even though you and I have not danced in the streets to Jamaican music, or we haven't ever looked at a radiology film together, I feel a real welcoming that you participating in these various cultures is welcoming rather than a kind of compartmentalizing. And it's one of the many qualities that I really appreciate in conversation with you.
Well, I think that, thank you so much for saying that. I think for me, it's interesting because I felt excluded in a lot of different areas of my life. Like I didn't quite fit in anywhere. And when I got to that place, I think it was somewhere in college where I was like, yeah, you're kind of unique and you don't necessarily fit 100% in one place. And that is okay, Sonia. We're not going to try and fit anywhere. We're just going to be Sonia, right? And Sonia, right? We're just going to be Sonia.
Yes, how beautiful that your last name is exactly right.
And I think when I really embraced me and didn't try to conform or like fit in and and blend in, but where I just was like, this is who I am. I don't fit in anyone's bed. And that's fun because like my sexual orientation, I'm pansexual, my relationship structure, I'm poly, like I don't fit in anywhere. But the universe made me and there's a purpose for me, right? So like I'm out here doing it, whatever it is.
I'm glad you said that because I was going to ask you how this plays out in your relationships, which you've answered in a broad sense, but also how this plays out when you're actually coaching on sexuality.
Well, I think that because I've had a number of different experiences in my life, I've gone from being in a heterosexual monogamous relationship and then going and having my next partner be lesbian and then making this transition. I like to laugh and think about my 30s. If you were to give me a label, it would have been heterosexual. In my 40s, I would have said homosexual, lesbian. My 50s, I'm like, I'm pansexual, right? So I think that all that serves me in the work that I do with my clients. There's like, I always say to my clients, you can't shock me. There's like, tell me anything you want to and be comfortable because I will not judge you. And I've probably done it or seen it or whatever, right? So it's not like when people come to me, I think they genuinely feel comfortable because they know that they're not going to be judged in any way. And I'm just here to help them. And I'm here to help them feel comfortable. And maybe that was the essence for my journey in life is so that I'm not there to judge, but I'm there to be a place of comfort and safety. That's something that's very important that I will help my clients with an environment of safety and any person that needs my assistance.
You know, pointing to being non judgmental, that is so true for you as a professional and wanting to broaden this so that somebody listening can take what you're saying and integrate and apply it in their relationship. Do you have a tip for how a listener becomes more accepting and less judgmental of their partner for any reason, whether it's a homosexual interest, a heterosexual interest, porn, BDSM? Like, there's so many things that even when somebody deeply loves their spouse, the conscious and unconscious judgments creep in and create disconnection and less fulfillment. So, I have a bigger topic I want to speak with you about, but I can't resist asking you how does do you have a tip for how to be less judgmental and more accepting specifically of one's own partner?
Yeah. So I would look at the situation, whatever the situation is, and see what it brings up for the person. Usually it brings up feelings of fear. Like there might be like if we were to say, for example, your partner had an affair or was using pornography or something like that, right? Then maybe there's judgment there that they should not be doing that on your part, right? But if you were to look below that initial judgment, then you might find a deeper thing, which is having to do with fear and either concern for being rejected yourself or concern that your relationship won't survive because of these activities. But there's usually some sort of fear underlying all that. And if we can get to what the underlying issue is, we can have compassion for our partner while we sort out what's going on with ourselves, if that makes any sense.
It completely does. And one of the things that I love saying, and it never gets old for me, is to point out that underneath every complaint is a desire. And to express the desire gets us more of what we want than expressing the complaint does. And similarly, from what you're saying, that underneath every judgment is a fear. And so when you feel a judgment, the very next place to go is to explore your fear.
Mhm.
And once you can resolve your fear or get to know yourself better and tame your fear, then you're prepared, if it's still needed, to have a conversation with your partner that comes from a more compassionate place. Anything
Yeah.
you'd add to that?
Yeah, I would definitely say that that's the case. And just to recognize that there's generally this concept that you want something from your partner, right? Like if it's fear, then you're concerned that you're going to be left alone, maybe you're feeling like you're not going to be loved, whatever. But ultimately, that's not what your partner's job is. It's not to love you or to take care of you or to make you feel safe. That ultimately is what you need to give yourself. Like start from a place where you are your own best partner. I also say you are your own best lover, right? So what would you, as your best lover, what would you do for yourself? And come from that place. Now, interacting and having a partner is a beautiful addition in your life, right? But if you're solely dependent upon another person to feel your worth or to feel love or joy or whatever, or companionship or whatever it is, if you're looking for that outside of yourself, you will never be whole and safe and happy because you're trying to depend on another person to meet your own needs. And that's not going to work well for you because it's not the other person's responsibility to meet your needs. They usually can't read your mind exactly what you need. And their responsibility or their job is just to love you, yes, but not to meet your needs, right?
That's so good because I was going to ask you, because when I've expressed this to people, I get back to question, well, then what's the point of being in a relationship?
It's to have
And
the experience of
to
the relationship.
have the experience, what a beautiful answer. And the other one you just gave is it's not to get your needs met,
Mm-mm.
it's to be loved. It's to
And
love and be loved.
exactly, to love, to have the experience of loving another human being, you know, and to have the experience of being loved. So like whenever, if I go into a relationship, there may be heartache at the end, there may be, but the question was, it's still worth doing? Did it change me and enhance my life? And the answer is always yes. So even if it ends and there is heartache there, I would still have the experience. And that still formed who I am by having that experience. And hopefully, if I can get to a place of unconditional love, that is such a beautiful blessing to the other person, but also to yourself. Because if you can love another person unconditionally, and for us, like usually we have a concept of unconditional love in the way we love our children, right? And if we can figure out that same unconditional love for ourselves and for our partners, then it's just the world opens up for you.
That's so beautiful. And I certainly think that having relationship provides the ultimate goal for personal growth. And so I think that just aligns so magnificently with what you're saying, that you get to have the experience, you get to learn and grow. And in that, you have created a course called Own Your Sexuality Now. And I've looked at that landing page. The description is dynamic, it's magnetic, it's juicy, it gives permission, it's full of judgment free compassion and inspiration. And you've had lots of women go through it, right?
Yes, I've had hundreds of women go through it. Yeah.
And tell me one or two things a woman who's gone through your course has said.
That it really changed their lives. Like it gave them permission to be who they are. Like they don't have to be anything else than who they are. That it's okay for them to want sex or not want sex, but also it put that shift onto themselves. And so much of women we have taught in society to be sexual objects and to put the focus on our partner in terms of meeting the partner's needs, right? And this shifts the perspective from off of the partner onto you. And what exactly are your needs in this situation? And it's even like just in the concept of like pleasure, your pleasure, but in like the bigger context of what is it like to put a woman's needs and her priorities first? What is that like when she actually says to herself, oh, I matter and I get to prioritize myself. Because, so when we get into that, like our 20s and beyond, actually, it starts in our teen years, like we are socialized as women to put everybody else's needs ahead of our own needs. And we don't necessarily learn how to prioritize our own needs. And then we get to that place where we're in our midlife, because I'm a midlife sex coach, right? We're in our midlife and like we're looking around and we're like, wait, this isn't what I necessarily wanted. This isn't the way I thought it was supposed to be, but I did everything that they said to do, right? I got the job, I got the education, I got the marriage, I got the kids, I got the house, I got, everything, and I'm not happy. And then we have to work, I talk about this concept of like, nobody's going to save you. There's no prince or princess out there to save you. You have to get up on your own horse and save yourself. This is what I have a fun name for it, which I don't know if you swear or not on your program. So are you
Go ahead. It's labeled explicit in the podcast world. So
okay. So I call it the selfish bitch, but from taking that back, right? Because those have been words that have been used against women so that we don't take care of ourselves. I call the selfish bitch the wise one. And she's the one that's actually going to save you, yourself, that part of you that's going to say, okay, I can prioritize my needs. I can take care of myself. I can get rest if I need to. I can express what I would like sexually. I can learn and explore my own body. And then this is all about that taking responsibility again for your own sexuality. Yeah, I could go on and on. But okay, so in terms of going back to the course, it's about women giving themselves permission, not me giving them permission, maybe initially, but then they realize, oh, I can just take this on. And then they use that in other aspects of their lives as well, right? So I hear women saying they become more comfortable with their sexuality. They get more comfortable. And yes, I am a sex coach, but I am also a women's empowerment coach. That's something.
So the course is for women exclusively, or women
it is for women
identifying
at this
people.
point in time. Yeah. So it is Own Your Sexuality Now is for women. And because I'm the midlife sex coach for women, I focus mainly on women's sexuality. I may expand it and have a component of men's health in there, because I'm finding that really when I'm doing this work for women, I'm also doing this work for men, right? Because
Yes.
there's issues that men in their 40s and beyond and even younger, are dealing with in terms of their sexual health too. And so I'm finding that when I'm looking at women's sexual health, that for those of them that have partners that have penises, then we do need to know what's going on with that as well and have an understanding. And I'm finding the more I understand about the socialization of women, that there's the equal socialization of men, where men are not being given permission to feel their emotions, to be like fully human, right? And to not necessarily take on the burden of a lot of responsibilities in many different ways. So as I do this work and recognize more and more and more what's going on with the socialization of women, I'm also looking at the partners and having compassion for them and recognizing it is hard to be a man in this world as well, right?
I completely agree. And men who are in heterosexual relationships, so often women assume, oh, he doesn't care, he doesn't feel as much, he's not as motivated to do the work. And my experience just across the board, since I mostly work with couples and far and away they're heteronormative, not exclusively, but mostly, that just is not true about men. What is true is that they are deep feelers who don't really know how to navigate that and mostly feel inadequate. And so that gets layered over with a little bit of disconnection and a little bit of bravado in whatever unique titration the particular man experiences. And when there is permission for him to say what his experience is, the most exquisite things happen. And once again, I'm going to rein myself in, make a note that maybe we discuss that in the future, because speaking of permission and straddling cultures and creating experiences that haven't been created before because of your unique collection of interests and expertise and giving yourself permission to be who you really are, you have done something that I also feel clients can't shock me. But to me, what you have done is as close to shocking as I come. And that is that you have gotten approval, which means you did the preparation, you made the proposal, and you have approval for an accredited CME for women physicians on sexuality. And while many of you listening are doctors and know exactly how remarkable that is, many of you are not. So I want to just explain how profound and exciting this is. So, anyone who's a physician has done a great deal of training in medical school and residency and just so much training to become a competent physician. But that is just the beginning of the journey, because there are ongoing exams throughout a physician's career, depending on their specialty and the context. There might be a day-long exam every 7 years, every 10 years. There are just so many exams, and anyone who legally practices medicine, depending on the state, it's different state to state, is probably doing about at least 100 hours of continuing education every 1 or 2 years. Again, there's variety in each state, so I'm not getting more specific. But when doing that additional training, a certain amount of those hours need to be in one's specialty field, and then other areas can be of general interest to physicians. And take it from here, Dr. Sonia Wright.
Yeah, so you're right in so many different ways. So I have this big bodacious goal, and that's to positively impact the sex lives of 1 million women, right? And so I
Just
started
say that again. Let us enjoy the goal as you get on to whatever's next. Give it to us again.
to positively impact the sex lives of over 1 million women.
Amazing.
And I thought to myself, how can I do this? So I started off as one-on-one coaching, sex coaching, and also I'm still a physician, private physician life coach, because that's what I started. And when I started this in 2016, I started as a physician life coach. And then in 2019, I switched over and I added on sexual counseling and became a sex coach. So I started doing this one-on-one, and I realized this is not it's gonna take a little while.
It's a very slow road to 1 million one-on-one.
Right. So then I created my online course, Own Your Sexuality Now. And I also actually have a monthly membership of Your Empowered Sexuality, which for people that don't need an intensive course, but just want a monthly membership where they can come and ask a sex coach for like less than the cost of like a session. You know, I also have that group going. But I was like, I'm just going to figure out as many ways as I can impact this. And so it kind of merges my two loves, right? Being a life coach for physicians and doing the work on sexuality, women's sexuality, right? So I was like, how can I impact 1 million women, and what's the fastest way to do that? And I was like, if I can impact the women physicians, then they could go out and it could spread, and they could impact the sex lives of their patients, and it could just continue to grow from there. So I'm like covering it in as many ways as I can think to do that. So I call it the Own Your Sexuality Now CME edition. And it's exclusive for women physicians, MDs and DOs. And it basically, it has the component of the sexual health, women's sexual health education that we may not have gotten in medical school. Most of us didn't really get a good look at that. So I
Right.
have
We got anatomy and physiology, but not sexuality. And there's a lot of overlap and a lot of non-overlap.
And a lot of non-overlap, right? So I'm like, it needs the component where people feel comfortable talking about women's sexuality. We don't have that information, right? And
okay, wait. Let's slow down with each piece, because that's amazing, because we know both from personal experience and the data that if a physician isn't comfortable having the conversation, they're not going to ask the question. So it sounds like the very first thing is to provide women physicians with the education to be comfortable enough to have the
Have the
conversation.
conversation. If you're not comfortable about talking about sex just in general, and if you have your own issues around sex, you're probably not going to be that comfortable talking to anybody else about sex. So the second component is the part of the examining and reframing and looking at the woman physician's own sexual experience in life and what's going on with her.
And let's just add in the data that any couple that talks about sex statistically is likely to be having much better sex. So this is a total win, 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 win. That
yes.
For the woman physician who does that module, they become comfortable with their own sexuality, more capable of talking about sex, and hopefully, although that's probably not mandated in the course, they discuss it with their partner and get the benefits of doing so while becoming more comfortable having these conversations with patients.
Exactly, right. And then the third component, since I am a physician life coach, is the physician wellness, women physician wellness. And so that part of it, that's where my life coaching skills come in. And then I have more guest life coaches coming in, all physician life coaches coming in and discussing whatever it is, like body image and exercise, negotiations for salaries, like if you have an anxiety component, like whatever it is, we're trying to also match that, right? So to get those three key elements together into one course, that's my goal. I was like, you know what, this course is going to reflect who I am and what I want to give the world.
Oh, I kind of have shivers because you're basically, with the CME, creating an invitation to all women physicians to join your culture.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. And I'm reminded, I can't remember how long ago I heard this study, which again is common sense, but as well, anyone, but specifically physicians, especially, we know that being healthy, that eating a good diet and exercising makes for more longevity and less disease. We also know that a physician who is significantly overweight and doesn't exercise is far less likely to be counseling their patients on the importance of eating well and exercising. In other words, we think of medicine as such an objective endeavor, and it is. And also, it's subjective in that as physicians, our own experiences influence how we counsel our patients. So, probably with radiology, it's one of the specialties where personal experiences influence your readings of, you're being a radiologist less than other specialties, like, because if you're looking at the film and there's pneumonia on the chest x-ray, then there's pneumonia on the chest x-ray, whether or not you've had pneumonia, whether or not your parent has suffered from pneumonia, like, you're going to see it or you're not going to see it. But when it comes to discussing sexuality or these more preventative health measures, then our own personal experience is, for better and for worse, one of the biggest drivers. So I'm in awe. And that as soon as I heard you were doing this CME, I said, oh, I want to bring you on. I want any women physicians listening to know about this. And I want everyone else to know about it too, because what a way to take a massive problem and create a solution through your contribution. I mean, that's one of the things that speaks to me so deeply. And to use your inter and intra cultural ease to introduce something into the culture of physician CMEs, continuing medical education, and bring your juice and your passion and your expertise. And I'm sure it's going to be presented with all of the above as a proper academic presentation with your yum.
My yum. I like that. Yes, definitely. I think that you're so good. Like, I love the way you describe me. I'm like, oh, I sound more interesting than I am, right?
No. You are not more interesting than I said. You are at least as interesting as I
At
said.
least it's interesting, right? I definitely consider myself unique, but yeah, this is what you're put on this earth for a reason. Each one of us is put on this earth for a reason. And this is my purpose. This is my reason. This is what, if this is my gift to women physicians and to couples, right? If I can make a difference, like I remember this one husband who's just made me laugh because one of my friends who is in my course was telling some of her other friends to just go ahead and buy the course. And they were like, well, I don't know, it's $2,000, blah, blah, blah. And that's for just the Own Your Sexuality. The CME edition is a little bit more. And the husband at the time checked in with the other husbands and it's like, dude, I don't know what they do in this course, but just pay the money. I don't know what they do. Don't ask, just pay the money and you will thank me, right? So like, that's like the husband's interpretations. But like to be able to give that gift and to help women give that gift to themselves where they can access their pleasure, they can get comfortable with being a sexual being, because we all have a right to be a sexual being, right? And yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do. And if I can bring in my medical academic side of things, and then I can bring it and merge it with my course and make sure the physician wellness is there, and you can get up to 25 CME credits for this. So it's definitely something that is like, you can immerse yourself in it. It's 12 weeks, 13 with the orientation, and it goes from September through November. And so it's like it's a good time of year to do this. It's right between you have your whole, the holidays are free. You've gotten the kids in school if you have any, and then the holidays are free. And that time in between is your time, right? It's your time to delve into this subject, to work and reframe and to look and to assess and look at your attitude around sex and sexuality, to get any holes filled in terms of sexual health education around women's issues, and to give yourself grace and to focus on your health and your well-being.
Amazing. And especially as we continue to emerge from the pandemic, emerge in quotation marks, I guess I would say. Any woman listening, especially in the midlife phase, what an opportunity. Either own your sexuality now, or if you're a physician, own your sexuality now, CME edition. It is, when you said it's good timing, I was thinking, yeah, it really is good timing with all of the trauma of the last 18 months, however it's impacted anyone, and then before the holidays come. I ask on every episode, based on my conviction that relationships are the ultimate vehicle for personal growth, as I said earlier, what have you learned about yourself through being in relationship? And I usually ask that in the context of the couple relationship, which is part of the conversation. In so many ways, this conversation has been about your relationship with yourself and your relationship with others in general. So take it as you will, but from either one of those relationships, what have you learned about yourself, specifically through being in that relationship?
Oh, this is an interesting question. What have I learned about myself? I learned about myself that I'm a loving and giving person. I've learned about myself that I am not perfect. Being in the medicine side of worlds, we like to consider ourselves perfect or try to get as close to being perfect, right? And to recognize that I don't have to be perfect. Nothing has to be perfect. It never is. It never will be. And it's just about living your life, having experiences with other people, having the opportunity to love other people, to be in relationship with them in whatever way that, there's the thing with non-monogamy, like there's many different forms of non-monogamy, right? And then there's the type of form where it's like non-hierarchical, and relationships that you have that are sexual or non-sexual are at the same level. And so they call it relationship anarchy. But if you look at that, it's just the focus on a relationship, an interaction between people, and how all that and all different forms of love are important. So it doesn't put the romantic or the sexual love higher than any other love. So any relationship you're in informs you about who you are as an individual. And just the opportunity to be in relationship with somebody else will tell you a lot about yourself. And it gives you the opportunity to grow, but ultimately the opportunity to experience love, unconditional love, to give of yourself, and to get in return. And that's all what this is about.
Oh, this is so beautiful. And I want to respond with something which you may not agree with. And of course, that's totally fine. But I think in the context of my work, I deeply prioritize the romantic, sexual, committed relationship. And one of the reasons that I do is because the amount of learning available required in such a relationship is so much higher, not necessarily than all relationships, but when you face your sexuality, there is such an invitation to growth that isn't necessarily extended when avoiding it. So I'm just going to leave that floating in the air as part of revisiting how important own your sexuality now is either the course or just the phenomenon in life. Any last words you want to say?
Well, I would say that I appreciate your opinion, and I think that that's an important opinion that a lot of people have. I also kind of have a little twist on that, in that in terms of sexual relationships, I think that our experience with sexual relationships in the majority of society says it's an external type of relationship with another person. But I think that any relationship that we're in that has a component of sexuality is just an expression of ourselves and our own relationship with ourselves, and dealing with the sexual component of our relationship with ourselves that is being allowed to be expressed in another type of relationship, usually a romantic sexual type of relationship. But within that context of the relationship, there is also another relationship, which is our relationship with ourselves and our own sexuality. So yes, I would agree that that would make it such that within the romantic relationship, it does have such an intensity and a willingness and an experience to learn a lot about ourselves. But I also see it as a relationship within another relationship.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Marriage Podcast. Please rate and review the show on iTunes. It really makes a difference. And if you have a question or a comment, reach out to me via my website at alexandrastockwell.com.